put the slides up and we'll start.
Sounds good.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation. And it's on the International Service Project of CFUW, which this year we are sharing with the Stephen Lewis Foundation. And the title of the event is Young, Happy, Healthy, and Safe, YHHS. So just so that you know, and notice that the happy comes before healthy. And we have with us tonight Shannon and Baru from the Stephen Lewis Foundation, because we worked with them and planned it when we were deciding which group we would partner with this year. So the agenda is, in a minute, I'll do the land acknowledgement and then talk about what the International Service Project is, and then I'll hand it over to Shannon and Baru from the Stephen Lewis Foundation. At the end, we'll have questions and answers. So if I could have the next slide, please. So we'll do the land acknowledgement. Second, okay. Collectively, the members of CFUW respect and honor the traditional territories of our First Peoples across Canada. From time immemorial, Canada has been and is the home of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We reflect on the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that today these lands continue to be shared territory of First Nations, Inuit, and the Métis. Reconciliation is more than just a word. It is a profound act of coming together to address past wrongs towards Indigenous peoples and move forward in a spirit of mutual respect, understanding, and healing. It involves seeing the truth of history, acknowledging the pain and suffering endured by others, and committing to actions that foster trust and unity. To me, reconciliation is both personal and communal, a journey that calls for introspection, empathy, and collective effort. It is actively building and continually building bridges. Thank you. So what is this International Service Project? Well, CFUW set this up some years ago to work with Canadian charitable organizations that have educational projects outside Canada, projects that contribute to the welfare of women and or children. And we've changed recently to a 2-year cycle. For 2025-27 then, we will support the Stephen Lewis Foundation, which we call the SLF, through the Young, Happy, Healthy, and Safe project in Zambia. CFUW clubs and individual members can donate by going to the CFUW website for more information. You can donate online or you can send a check, and the information is all on the website. And the website is listed here as well, but you can get it. Okay, can we move to the next slide, please? So, young, happy, healthy, and safe. This mobilizes community support, builds local capacities, and raises awareness of children's rights and needs, including their sexual, reproductive, and psychosocial health, while working to prevent new HIV transmissions and to support children who have already been impacted by the HIV epidemic. The International Relations Committee and the ISP subcommittee are going to promote this project, and provide periodic updates. I'd like to mention at this point that Pat Patton, who just got elected as GWI president, Pat has been the president of the subcommittee, the ISP subcommittee, for the past year. And taking her place will be Larissa Stringfellow this coming year. Pat will stay on the committee as a member, though. So our goal is to raise 15,000 in year one of this project. So while we were attending the GWI Triennial at Lusaka, Zambia, in September, just a few weeks ago, 5 CFUW members flew to the Eastern Province to visit 3 SLF schools at Stephen Lewis Foundation schools, which we will be assisting with funding. The people who went were President Linda Sestock, Gail Neff, Lynn Kent, Beryl Mathewson, and myself, Grace Hollett. We received a very enthusiastic welcome at schools. We're dealing with many challenges as they care for and educate children in day schools and boarding schools. Baru, who is program manager, and Shannon, who is director of development and communications, both from the Stephen Lewis Foundation, will speak to you now about this project, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. I am going to just quickly share my screen, and I will go into slide mode. Can everyone see my slide deck? All right.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for having Baru and I here to speak to you today, and thank you for choosing the Stephen Lewis Foundation and YHHS.
Sorry, I think it was in the presenter mode instead of the full screen one. Yeah.
Sorry, let me see if I can fix that. Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Sorry, extended screens are my nightmare. And I was saying earlier that we're a Teams organization. So anytime I go on Zoom, it takes me a minute to remember how to use it. So apologies for that, everyone. As I was saying, just thank you so much for having us and for choosing to partner with Stephen Lewis Foundation and YHHS for your next 2-year commitment. We're really excited to have you on board as a partner. I think we share a mutual partner in 60 Million Girls, which is how the introduction came about to our organization, and really excited to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the Stephen Lewis Foundation because I'm aware some of you will know who we are, but some of you won't. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about who we are. Beru, my colleague from the programs team, will be able to tell you everything you want to know about Young, Happy, Healthy, Safe, and their programs in Zambia that you will be supporting. And then we'll just wrap it up with a little bit about the fundraising and what support we can provide. And then obviously are here to answer any questions that you may all have. And hopefully this will let me advance. So I'll start very simply before I talk about the foundation with who is Stephen Lewis, because I was fortunate enough to accompany Grace and the other women that went to Chapata to visit some of the projects. And I became very aware that some of you are very familiar with Stephen Lewis and some of you may not be. So just thought I would share a little bit more information about who Stephen is and why he started this foundation. So in the late 70s, he was the leader of the NDP here in Ontario, and he became the leader of the official opposition in the provincial government as a result. From 1984 through 1988, he was Canada's ambassador to the UN. From 1995 to 1999, he was the deputy executive director of UNICEF in New York. Then he held a very special position that inspired him to start the foundation as the Secretary General's Special Envoy for AIDS and HIV in Africa from 2001 until 2006. So during that time in 2003, he co-founded with his daughter, Alana, the Stephen Lewis Foundation, because he, as part of that role as Special Envoy, was fortunate to visit and see many people in Africa and realized that there were communities that were suffering a great deal, but were really mobilizing and trying to come up with solutions. And he thought what he needed to do was start a foundation to really mobilize support for them in Canada to help those community-led organizations that were addressing the crisis. He's the author of a great book called Race Against Time. If you haven't read it, it's celebrating its 20th anniversary this year and holds, I think, 42 honorary doctorates from around the world. So he's quite celebrated, and we're very fortunate to continue to have Stephen and his daughter, who's no longer the executive director, but they both sit on our board now. So for more than 20 years, the Stephen Lewis Foundation has really aimed to challenge traditional power structures. We're a feminist organization, an anti-racist organization, and an anti-colonial organization. So by challenging those power structures in international development, we're really trying to shift the resources into the hands of the local communities, in particular in 14 countries in Africa in which we work. The HIV epidemic remains a public crisis in African countries, and it's fueled by racism, gender inequality, and colonialism. So we're really committed to those community-led solutions. We have 98 partners in those 14 countries that we work in, and we provide funding to them, but also allyship to those local organizations that are at the center of how we're going to solve this HIV and AIDS crisis. And they're restoring hope, reclaiming human rights, and fighting injustice and saving lives in their countries. So we're really proud of all the partnerships that we have, and they're quite long-term partnerships, as you'll hear about our partnership with YHHS when Barry talks a little bit more about that. We've got, we are an organization that focuses on AIDS and HIV, but obviously we partnered with you because of education, and there are many facets to the AIDS and HIV crisis, and addressing the medical or healthcare issues we know is not sufficient to really solving the issue. So we have 6 key areas in which we partner with people and organizations in Africa. So children and young people, obviously, we know that they're quite impacted by this crisis. There are many orphans and vulnerable children who have lost one or both parents to the crisis and may in fact be HIV positive themselves. And so making sure that we focus on the needs of children and young people to support the younger generation is really important to our work. We run a campaign called Grandmothers to Grandmothers. This is really one of the foundational parts about the Stephen Lewis organization. And I was fortunate in that one of the CFUW women that accompanied us, Lynn, on the trip to Zambia is actually a member of the Vancouver Grandmothers group. This was really fueled by the fact that so many people in the early days of the AIDS crisis were dying, that a lot of grandmothers in Africa were having to take in their grandchildren who had been orphaned by the crisis. And grandmothers here in Canada and around the world wanted to show their solidarity and support. And so we've got this Grandmothers to Grandmothers campaign, which is all about, Canadian grandmothers and British grandmothers and Australian grandmothers coming together to fundraise and support and act in solidarity with the grandmothers in Africa that have had to raise their grandchildren as a result of the AIDS crisis. Home-based care is really important to us. We know that it's really difficult sometimes for people to access healthcare or to get to clinics to make sure that prevention and treatment of HIV and AIDS is possible. So working with partner organizations that are able to get into communities to help deliver that healthcare is a really important measure in making sure we're addressing the epidemic. Access to health and well-being for people with HIV. So this involves helping to reduce stigma and ensure that people living with HIV and AIDS are able to enjoy economic independence and live full lives. Ending violence against women and girls. Again, we know that this is an issue in many of the countries that we work in, and transmission rates can often be higher when women are experiencing violence. And so we're working to address that situation. And also health and human rights for LGBTIQ communities, again, largely related to stigma, some even the criminalization of homosexuality in some of the countries we work in. So it's a very serious area that we're addressing with a lot of our partner organizations. So these are the 6 key areas that SLF works in. They are, the term that we always use is they're intersectional. All of them are sort of part and parcel with one another. So we try and address all of the parts of people's livelihoods, education, safety, access to healthcare, access to human rights. So while partners may focus in one or two key areas. We know that it's about solving all of these issues and working in partnership, and also addressing emerging issues such as climate change, which is, leading to drought and food insecurity and other issues that are having an impact on people living with AIDS and HIV as well. Oops, sorry, I'll try and go back to that slide. Just to put into context, so since the start of the AIDS epidemic, 91.4 million people have acquired HIV and 44.1 have died from AIDS-related illnesses. Last year, which is the most recent numbers we have from UNAIDS, 45% of all new HIV transmissions were among women and girls, but in the countries where we work, that number is actually much higher at 63%. So again, that's a reason why we really focus on women and girls as part of our programmatic work. And since 2010, new HIV transmissions have actually been reduced by 40%. Some of the progress that we've made has been put at risk by big global aid cuts this year. So we're really working with our partners and trying to do everything we can to address funding needs and make sure that that progress is protected. And just finally, again, HIV prevalence amongst girls and young women is more than 3 times higher than in their male peers, which is another reason why we really focus on this. So the sub-Saharan Africa is not exactly the region as we describe our work, but it's the best comparable that UNAIDS delivers statistics in. So I just did want to say that. But in that area of Africa, every week, 4,000 adolescent girls and young women aged 15 to 24 acquired HIV in 2024. And 3,300 of those were in sub-Saharan Africa. But part of why education is really a foundational part of our work is because when girls complete secondary school, their risk of acquiring HIV is reduced by up to 50% in some countries. So again, it may not be a natural, when you hear we're working AIDS and HIV and a lot of our programmatic work is in education, there is a reason why that is the case. And just before I pass it over to Baro to talk really specifically about the organization that you guys will be partnering with and fundraising for in the next couple of years, just wanted to reflect, I was fortunate to visit a few of our partners before heading over to Chapata to visit YHHS, and just to reflect on a few of the challenges, just to give you a little bit of a contextual background on Zambia. So climate change is having a really severe impact in many facets of the Zambian life. There was a really severe drought in 2024, which is leading to food scarcity. And obviously that's leading to malnutrition and issues with some of our school feeding programs. It's also a lot of the electricity in Zambia is provided by hydroelectricity. And because there's no water to actually run the electricity, they're practicing something called load shedding, which are intentional scheduled rationing of electricity, which means that most people only have electricity for 3 or 4 hours every day as a way to make sure that the grid stays up and people do have some access to electricity. But one school I visited, for example, they tend to have power between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., which is, as you might imagine, not the most useful time when you're running a primary school to have power. So it's really causing a lot of issues in communities, and they're looking at alternatives like generators or solar power to try and address that. There's also been quite a few changes to educational policy and curriculum in the country in the last few years. So a really great policy was introduced a few years ago called Education for All. That's launched in 2018. Which is, of course, a wonderful thing. And the government schools do really want to make sure that everyone is attending school. But unfortunately, a lack of teachers or a lack of funding is leading to, the worst I heard was class sizes of up to 183 students in one class, which, as you can imagine, the ability of a teacher to actually teach when there are that many students in their class is severely limited. So that's why some of the community programs that we fund through community schools are helping to address that and really reduce the class sizes and make sure that children have access to quality education, not just any education. And they're also in the midst of a new education curriculum framework that's rolling out across the country, which is essentially, at the moment, school goes to grade 12, similar to, I think, most provinces here in Canada. However, they're changing it to go to grade, let me get this right, grade 6, and then have forms 1, 2, 3, and 4 as sort of seniors. So you'll actually be done secondary school at what it is essentially year 10. Again, the government is hoping this means that more students will complete school, because a lot of kids are leaving early to earn an income for their family, or because they're not able to participate. So the school was the Minister of Education was hoping that by reducing the number of years, it would make it easier for students to actually complete. And they are trying to let teachers in those forms have students choose areas that are of interest and that they're successful in. So if a student is really not good in chemistry, then let's find something else for them to be in so that they can get their certificate and focus in an area that's good for them. I think it's a good thought, but I do think there are challenges in rolling it out, especially since the new forms 1 to 4 teachers need to have higher sort of advanced degrees than other elementary school teachers, which means it's harder to find them, and they cost more to employ. So I think a lot of the schools that we work with are struggling to be able to roll out the new curriculum framework that they've still got another couple of years to do. So again, great policies, and I think at the heart of them is good and wanting children to get educated. But unfortunately, rolling out those policies is proving challenging. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of economic challenges there. Cost of living is impacting Zambia, as it is most countries around the world. So lots of students are leaving school early to work. Also, child marriage or pregnancy. So there are reasons that students are leaving school early that our partners are trying to address. And as I mentioned before, USAID has cut a lot of global funding to countries. It was about $50 million US dollars to Zambia alone, which is having a big impact on, even if people weren't directly funded by USAID as an organization, some of the things that the government used to be able to provide, like HIV tests, because of that funding, is becoming more and more hard for organizations to procure. So again, just a little bit of contextual background into Zambia to let you know the sort of challenges that some of our partners are working with. But with that, I will pass it on to my colleague Beru to tell you a little bit more about YHHS and the programs that you guys will be supporting.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Is my audio okay? Okay, yeah. Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Baru, and I'm a program manager with the Stephen Lewis Foundation. And I also happen to be a program manager for YHHS, or HAPPY, as I like to call them. So just a bit of background on HAPPY. They've been a partner of the SLF since 2008, and they've been in operation for 20 years now, and they've actually just recently celebrated that 20th anniversary, which is a huge, huge milestone. I was speaking with Zikalo, who is the executive director of HAPPY, and he was sharing about how instrumental the support of the SLF has been in their journey, because we've been with them for so many years, and we've seen the growth, we've seen the kind of impact that they have in the community. They started off with 1 district, and they're now in 8 districts. So I think they can't see the speaker. It's on camera. So maybe we might need to spotlight me. Okay. Thanks for that, Donna. So yeah, so they're now in 8 districts, so they've really expanded over the years, and it really speaks to the importance of the work that they do. And I think just Shannon has mentioned around the work that they do in education. The way that HAPPY works is they recognize that the school is the heart of the community. And with this knowledge, they're able to really use it as a hub for the community to come together and to address issues that are affecting children and young people. And some of these issues are child marriages, early pregnancies, HIV, child labor, again, like really highlighting some of the realities that they are facing in their communities, like the economic challenges. And then the other piece to understand about their approach is they want to create an enabling environment for children. So it's not just a matter of just focusing on that one child, but also just focusing on the household and ensuring that the rest of the household is supported to be able to care for that child. Like Shannon mentioned, most of these children are, they're being taken care of by the grandparents, or some of the households are actually child-headed. So it's very important for them to be able to create that environment that can continue to support them. And just a quick overview of the project that Happy currently has with the SLF. They have improved access to education, and I'm going to be talking a bit more into detail about each one of these. So for now, I'm just going to just touch on each of them. So they improve access to education by working with children who are going into government schools. They strengthen the economic capabilities of the households that the children are coming from, again, touching back on that holistic support. And they also ensure that their children and their households have access to essential services. So this could be like health services, any referrals that they might need, mentorship sessions, SRHR. So making sure that they are really supported in the various facets of their lives. So we can go to the next slide. And then for their education support, which is, again, at the very core of the work that they do, we've heard from, like, what they've shared with us over the years in terms of the kind of peoples that they work with. Like Shannon has mentioned, these are children who have lost one or both of their parents. And what has happened is that the grandparents have had to step in and take over that caretaking role. And then these are also children who school attendance was compromised. Either they had to drop out of school to earn a wage for their household, or because of early pregnancy or child marriage or caring for the sick parents. Now with earning a wage, again, with the economic challenges, but also like recognizing that connection between climate change and how it can impact that education is, if there's a drought, then we are looking at food scarcity. We are, looking at people not having an income, especially for those households that are depending on agriculture or for farming. And what ends up happening is households that are being headed by grandparents, and in most cases, these are the grandmothers. And sometimes they're too unwell to be able to take up farming. Sometimes it's just, they are very much into their senior years and they're not able to do as much as they used to do before. So what ends up happening is that that responsibility ends up shifting to children. And what Happy has seen in the community is it can lead to things like sex work, petty crimes, transactional sex, child labor, which again is taking kids away from school. And then for caring for sick parents, what they've seen is that women and girls, they often bear the brunt of HIV caregiving. So girls are the ones who usually have to leave school to take care of their sick parents, which again really takes them away from being able to get an education. So how does Happy come into all of this? What are some of the services that they provide? What are some of the supports that they provide to children and their families? So the first one is school materials. Even though education is free, it doesn't mean that access is there. Because what it means is that if a child, for example, doesn't have a school uniform, they go to school and they're feeling different from their peers. Maybe they get bullied and they end up not going to school. And sometimes families are not in a position to be able to afford some of these materials, which again can really become a barrier to a child being able to access education. So even though it's free, sometimes there are still these financial challenges that households are seeing and they're experiencing. And that's where Happy comes in to support, kind of provide a bit of support to the households, to the parents, and take up some of that financial burden. The other way that Happy supports is through the school visits. And this is what they do to monitor enrollment and retention. So with these school visits, the volunteer is going to the schools that the children are in, they check up on them, they see if there are any issues that maybe the child is having, and this allows for early intervention. So before it gets to a point where a child ends up dropping out of school, they're able to catch some of these issues a bit early and then provide the necessary support either for the child, for the household, or it might mean referring them to other services that they might need. And then the other support that they provide is menstrual products for girls. As we know that, period poverty is something that can also become a barrier to a girl child accessing education. So those missed school days can end up leading to them dropping out of school. So Happy has those disposable and reusable menstrual products that they support girls with, just so they can retain them and make sure that they are able to show up in school with confidence and be able to learn that like their peers without having to worry about their periods or where they want to get their next menstrual product. And then lastly, the other intervention is really mobilizing the community. So a big part of Happy's work is ensuring that the community structures are there to continue supporting this work, even if Happy was not there. So they involve the local leaders like chiefs, they work with the schools, they work with the Parent-Teacher Association, the faith-based groups in the community to really come together and champion the education of girls, especially because they are the ones who are mostly disproportionately affected, like Shannon has already mentioned. And the other part is they have these women champions who go into schools, they talk to children, they are able to encourage those that have dropped out of school to go back into school, and for those that are in school to stay in school. So this is just an overview of their education support, and we can go on to the next slide, please. So in this slide, we have a quote from one of the caregivers really highlighting the relief that can come from the kind of support that Happy provides to families. And it reads, "The project has really helped me in the sense that it has reduced the burden of soliciting funds to send some of the orphans that I look after to school, because I used to struggle a lot. Some children have managed to progress to the next grade as a result of the aid they were receiving from YHHS. And again, we hear so many of these stories from Happy just around that, lifting that financial burden from parents and ensuring that it doesn't become a barrier to children accessing education." Next slide, please. Now, another piece of the work is around sexual and reproductive health and rights, or SRHR. So like I mentioned before, they really use the school as that entry point for children to access other services. And we know that, being in school increases girls' exposure to SRHR. And without those tools, without that knowledge, then girls are more likely to experience things like early marriage or unintended pregnancies, which then gets them out of school. It limits their economic opportunities, and as a result, we see that cycle of poverty continuing. So being able to equip the girls with the tools and confidence to protect not only their health, but to really shape their own future, to make informed decisions, to have that agency about their own lives. That's where that SRHR education is very, very important, because we are seeing that disproportionate HIV prevalence affecting girls, like Shannon was sharing, like 3 times more than their counterparts. And it really speaks to how much this kind of work is needed. So what are some of the ways that Happy comes in to support girls in this area? So one of the ways is the education, that SRHR education in youth clubs. So these are the clubs that they have in the various schools that they work with, and also during the household visits. So this is part of that home-based care that Shannon mentioned as well, where they go into the households, they visit the families, they talk to the children about, SRHR, about puberty, about sex. Even though they do have those conversations, they do face challenges around pushback from parents sometimes, because it is still taboo to talk to adolescents around issues of sex. But that is where, again, like understanding the cultural nuances of some of those conversations, and being able to have those conversations with parents and really making them understand why those are important, that talking to a child and giving them that information doesn't mean you're encouraging them to go out and do it, but it's really a way to protect themselves and be able to make informed choices. So it really highlights the importance of community-led organizations in being able to have these kind of conversations that can really be difficult to have sometimes. And then the other way that they work is the inclusion of children with hearing and visual impairment. So they've noticed that the children living with disabilities are often excluded from conversations around SRHR and HIV prevention. So they're really being intentional by making sure that they include them in this conversation. They go to the schools, they work with the teachers who, they're able to, what is the word? Like do the interpretation, the sign language interpretation, and they have the materials in Braille that makes that information accessible so they are not left behind. Because what they've seen is they're even more vulnerable to issues of sexual violence, gender-based violence. So it's very important for them to also be empowered, and for them to be able to have that knowledge and those tools for themselves. And then another interesting one is Rachel Plus, which is one of the digital platforms that they use. So Rachel stands for Remote Area Community Hotspot for Education and Learning. So Rachel Plus is basically a server that you can use in remote areas. So it takes the learning to learners in remote areas who might not have internet. You've just talked about, the load shedding problems that are very common in Zambia. And in those kind of communities, by having a device like Rachel Plus that they can plug into without needing internet, that allows them to be able to, access more of that information on SRHR, HIV prevention, family planning, contraception. And it ensures that, again, they're not being left behind out of these conversations. And then the last one is menstrual products that we've already touched on. So the next slide is just a quote from one of the young people that they have worked with. So the picture is a young person holding up some of the reusable menstrual products that they have in the school. So the quote reads, "Thank you, young, happy, healthy, and safe, for providing us with reusable sanitary pads. Your support has made it possible for us to attend school every day without fear or embarrassment. We are now able to focus on our studies and build a brighter future for ourselves. Because of you, we feel empowered and confident." Again, it really speaks to like that, removing that barrier to education and ensuring that they're able to go to school with that confidence, with that empowerment, and not having to worry about what is going to happen if I get my period. We can go to the next one. Now, just to kind of bring everything together. So at the core of the work that Happy does is what we call that holistic support. And this is the quote at the top is what they've shared in some of the reports that they shared with us, is that they don't just target a child within the family without considering the needs of other siblings or children, as well as the needs of primary caregivers at the household level. And again, the intention and the goal is to make sure that enabling that thriving environment is created for a child, that even when Happy is no longer there, the caregivers are still able to support the orphaned and vulnerable children under their care. So some of the interventions that they have under holistic support is the economic empowerment of caregivers through the provision of farming inputs. So these are the maize, seeds, and the fertilizers. And because of, first of all, they improve their nutrition. They also can sell the surplus and they can get some income from that. But also they're also looking at the realities of climate change. So Happy also teaches them about climate change. They teach them about, drought-resistant crops and some of the techniques that they can use to really protect their harvest. And they also teach them around food preservation techniques so that the food that they do harvest can really last them a long time. Again, really improving their nutrition and being able to sustain them a lot longer. And then one of the services, again, is serving groups. So the savings groups, when the caregivers it's mostly women, it's mostly the grandmothers, they are coming together and they pull their funds together. Once they have that pool of funds, they're able to take out loans that are a very, very small interest compared to what they would get from traditional financial services, which they don't usually have access to anyway. So by having these savings group, they're able to meet their basic needs. They're able to grow that pool of funds. They're able to start businesses. They're able to just do a lot more without having to, a lot more that they can do to support themselves and their households. And then another part of that work is child protection services. So this is around making sure that children and caregivers are sensitized about their rights. They know how to identify sexual abuse, which is, again, unfortunately very common. They know where to go when such cases happen. They know, the kind of language to use and the kind of supports that they can access when those kind of scenarios happen. And then lastly is the referral linkages with other service providers. So Happy does not work in a vacuum. They have these very impactful partnerships, either with the government, with the district, with other community-led organizations, with health facilities, where they're able to make sure that the community members are able to get referred to these different services that they might not have. Again, it's recognizing that there's a lot of diversity to the needs that they do come across, and being able to support the community and linking them to those services is very, very important to the overall well-being of not just the households, but of the community in general. Next slide, please. And then lastly, looking at the impact, this is just a snapshot of the current project with them. And we've seen it's only been the first year of the project, but they've already reached to more than 2,000 girls with menstrual products, which increases their school attendance. 120 people have been supported with school materials, again, really supporting them to stay in school. And what they've seen is that these children that are supported by the SLF, there's a huge improvement in their performance. And it's about like taking off that burden that they used to have before and being able to focus on their education. And the other impact is just sustainable programming, because they work with existing community structures. And this allows the community to take ownership of this project, of this work. And even when Happy is no longer there, they are still able to continue with this work themselves. And lastly, the impact that we see is the capacity of households that are strengthened to support the orphaned and vulnerable children under their care. So that's the end of my section. And I think the biggest takeaway is really just how interconnected the work that Happy does is. It's not just about education, but also like the other supports that can really ensure that the children can thrive, the households can thrive. So I will pass it over back to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Baru. I just have a few slides and wanted to share a little bit of us Happy travelers that were fortunate enough to visit Happy in Chapada last month. So we've got a couple of pictures here in front of the very small plane that got us to the Eastern Province. It was a little bit, I'm sure Grace or anyone would be happy to fill you in. It was a little bit of a comedy of errors, in that the plane that we were supposed to be on wasn't working, and they had two smaller planes, but they miscounted the seats and thought there wasn't room for me. And so we were messaging Zakalo, who was waiting for us at the airport, and saying, oh, we may have to wait even longer. But then they realized there was room for me on the plane. So we managed to all get there together, but it was quite late. And also the trip there was a little bit longer than what we thought. And we were surprised when the permanent secretary of the Eastern Province of Zambia, who's the equivalent of a provincial premier, basically wanted to greet us. And so we'd accidentally kept him waiting for a few hours with all of our flight and travel delays. And he took us and Zakalo and the YHHS team by surprise by showing up and wanting to welcome us. So as I said a couple of times to Linda and a few of the others, I probably wouldn't have chosen my capris and Skechers if I'd known I was meeting such a senior government official and not just visiting a few rural schools. But we managed to make it in one piece, and the permanent secretary actually offered us his car for the couple of days, which made for a much more comfortable trip than all of us crammed into Zakalo, who you can see in the center of that picture there, who graciously was such a good host and picked us up from the airport and made sure that we had everything that we need and were able to see as much of the projects as possible. So, oh, there's a chat going. I wonder if that's the spotlight. Oh, no. Just something else. Sorry, I will stop reading comments, but somebody will tell me if it's an important comment, and I will pause. Now, okay. And I've shared all my pictures with Linda and Grace and the others from the trip, but I just thought this was an especially good one. This was the first school that we visited, which is Munga Primary School. And we had sort of split up into two groups. So I think a few of us were here talking to some of the students, while the rest of the team was off talking to the teachers. And we asked them to try and teach us some of their local language, which resulted in much laughter from the children, because I think our pronunciation was not quite up to par based on their reactions. But it was a really great opportunity to meet some of them and hear about what their favorite topics were, what they enjoyed learning about school. And they did just provide us with such a warm welcome. You know, and Zakalo, the executive director from Happy, you know, kept saying, you know, you sometimes think, oh, if we're such a disruption, they're, you know, they should be learning, and you know, they're making such a big fuss about us coming here. And but you know, he said several times, you know, with the permanent secretary, and we also had somebody from the Ministry of Education coming around with us. I think that speaks, one, to how respected Happy is in the communities that they work in. The work that they're doing is seen as really important work. And Zakolo also said, like, it's really encouraging to for the students to have these visitors and see that they matter to people and that people care about their education and know that they're working hard. And I think especially, you know, in the women in our group that were there, you know, we had a physician and a former teacher and lots of roles that I think the children there, you know, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, were roles that they want. So as much as I think we felt guilty sometimes in thinking, oh, they should not be making such a big deal about us being here, it apparently was, you know, an important visit for them and getting the attention of, you know, the local government and Minister of Education as well, was quite a big deal for them. So I'm glad that our visit could help facilitate that. Here's all of us with a lot of the grandmothers that were there that day and sort of wanted to meet us and again talk about the holistic work that Happy is doing in the community. So there's lots of pictures. Again, I'm sure any of the women that were there would be happy to share them with you and share some of their experiences. One of the other schools, we went to the Migwero boarding school. There's sort of two buildings, two units about 1 kilometer apart. One is a school for the deaf and one is a school for the blind. And because of our delays, by the time we got to the school from the blind, it was quite late and getting dark, and we were keeping the children from their normal routines, and we didn't want to keep them too long. But we did witness an absolutely gorgeous sunset while we were leaving the school for the deaf. So again, a really strong welcome here. Really great to have a chance to, you know, with the help of an interpreter, hear again what the children enjoyed learning about. I think we also asked them, you know, what they know about Canada, which is how we all learned the sign language word for cold, because that's the only thing that they knew about Canada when we asked them. But, you know, asking them what they wanted to be as well. And, you know, just the students there are really happy and really proud of their accomplishments and I think enjoyed showing off their school to us again. So not feeling like too much of a burden, but being really welcomed by the community and the students and the teachers there. I have a couple more slides just to help out with some of the fundraising aspects and any support that we might be able to provide you, and then we can wrap it up and pass it over to you guys if there's any questions. I think I'm not sure if it was Jamie or Grace earlier that mentioned, so definitely donating online is possible. We've set up a specific link, which is there, and I will share this presentation with you guys if it's useful for you to have for anything. So we've set that up, and that means any donations that go through, they'll be automatically receipted with an email, and we'll automatically know that those gifts are part of the CFUW sort of fundraising goal and make sure everything gets credited to that. We're absolutely more than happy to receive donations by check as well. So we've got the details there about where to send it and who to make it payable to. And if you could, just so that we can make sure that we're giving you guys credit where credit is due, to just make sure that you include the CFUW club name in the note or somewhere accompanying the check, just so that we can make sure that we're including it in the total, because I know you guys have your fundraising target that you're hoping to achieve. So we want to make sure that we are ensuring accuracy when we enter all of the gifts and are giving you credit for that. I will just say, you know, again, I mentioned earlier, we take our role as an anti-feminist, an anti-racist, and anti-colonial organization quite seriously. So just wanted to say it's really important to us and our identity as an organization that our community partners and their beneficiaries are portrayed, you know, with agency and dignity, and they're the strong actors that are working to improve their communities. So again, I mentioned these are community-led initiatives. We know that they are the solution, that they are there fighting for their communities, and really what we want to do is help unlock some funding and provide any other capacity building support or resources that can help them achieve the things that they are very capable of doing. So we just ask that, you know, that when you're choosing images or languages, that you just make sure that we're really ensuring that agency and dignity is protected with them. I mean, these are things like, you know, again, and I'm sure you're a group of very educated women, and I don't need to tell you, but using words, you know, survivor instead of victim, or other words that we have. happy if there's any questions or there's any support that we can provide with your fundraising at all. I've left here my contact details, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Karimi is also sort of the person on my team who's helping to coordinate this, and I've left her email address there. Unfortunately, she was on leave this evening and wasn't able to join us, but again, you can contact Karimi or myself, and either one of us is happy to help you and support you. And again, we're just, so grateful to you guys for choosing our organization, for partnering with us. I think Happy is a brilliant organization, and I'm so glad that a few CFUW women got to go and meet Sakalo and meet some of the teachers and students and grandmothers in these projects. I think it makes such a difference to really bring life to kind of what you're supporting in those communities. So yeah, again, just want to thank you sincerely and say any support that we can offer in your fundraising efforts, please just reach out and let us know. And with that, I will stop sharing so that I can see all of your lovely faces again. And I will, pass back to you if you've got any questions, about fundraising, about Stephen Lewis Foundation, about the program itself. Beru and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, if you have questions, you can hit the react button at the bottom of your screen and raise hand. Use the raise hand symbol. If that doesn't work for you, just wave your hand and we'll see you. So who has the first question? Okay, Lynn Kent.
I'm mute. Yeah, I think one of the most impactful things for me in the visit, Shannon, was the albino children at this school for the blind, and how they talked about how vulnerable they are to kidnapping, and their a simple wish for a fence for the school. And that just really, struck a chord to my heart, that that they would be that kind of left that unsafe. So I don't know if that's ever part of the work that Stephen Lewis does around addressing those kind of additional needs that seem to make a difference. I think the other one that was very upsetting was contaminated water, that they just don't have access to clean water. Anyway, I know from the Grandmothers Campaign that those things do. Stephen Lewis Foundation does work with communities around water, and as you talked about, farming, and yeah. So anyway, I just wondered if you have any more information about that.
Yeah, I can, and it was something I had flagged with Beru because I knew it was something that you guys had taken a keen interest in. I think the answer is that it's not currently part of our partnership agreement with Happy. And I think the CFUW agreement is kind of rolled up into our original partnership.
Right.
I think it, as we've said, we're really community led. So these organizations, they tell us what they need. So whatever they kind of factor in as priorities. So I'm sure with funding what it is, there are many more priorities that haven't been able to be part of it. So I think the answer is that it's not currently part of it. It's definitely something, and I flagged it with Beru, who again is the program manager. I'm sure we'll be having conversations with Sakalo and various members of Happy to see if, in future funding agreements, or should this fundraising campaign be really successful and it raise more than what we've agreed to fund, then that's absolutely something if that's what they deem a priority. So I think the answer is, just wanting to set clear expectations. It's not part of the funding agreement at the moment,
Right.
but definitely something that again, took notice of during that trip and have flagged with Beru. And just want to say something that Linda mentioned, which I meant to mention in my presentation as well, and maybe she's about to say it, so maybe I won't steal your thunder, Linda, since I just saw your hand go up. So I was just going to say that you commented on one of the students at the School for the Blind it was wonderful. They'd all prepared. A lot of them sort of stood up and said various things about some of, you know, the youth clubs or various things that they were learning. And one student kind of stood up and said, you know, that she's proud to be an agent of change for Zambia. And I think that that moment of, it's not just about an education, but empowering, you know, as Barry said, these, you know, students that often, because of, you know, their different abilities are maybe overlooked or aren't empowered as much or included. So I think that was a really wonderful moment as well. So I'm sorry if that was what you were about to say, Linda, and I stole your wonderful quote.
That's okay. That's exactly what I was thinking. I wrote it in the chat because they got up and they were talking about how they're advocates of change. And it just really, you know, there were some challenging things that we saw, but overall, amazing, intelligent, very open to learning. The teachers so appreciated us being there and telling we were shocked by how well behaved the students were. And then we tried to explain this to the teachers and they're like, oh, really? Like they were quite shocked. And once they opened up, they were just very excited to share everything with us, from their special bathrooms, which are very basic, to all of their classrooms. Very proud. And yes, it's very important that everything there, they know what they need. They can do what needs to be done. They just need us to give that mental, because they need support too, knowing that's some people way over in cold Canada care about them really makes a difference. And then the money to be able to do these things is, I get emotional. And I just want to say the CFUW ladies, they really rocked it. They were just amazing. So very proud of everybody who came to Chapada with me. And I really hope you guys dig deep and give us lots of money because it's going to go a long way. And we're going to start sharing the pictures from everything. And there's even a video. There was poetry, music, dance. Even the parents sang for us. So it's a very joyful, amazing experience. And I just wish all of you could have been there with us.
Thank you, Linda. I spoke with one child after we had seen some of the buildings and were told about the 125 kids in a class, this sort of thing. And one girl told me that she's going to be a nuclear physicist. So I thought, good, good. Are there more questions? I think I imagine most of your questions were answered already by the speakers. That's good. And if you have more in the coming days, just get back to if you
Grace,
can contact.
Jane Cox has a question.
Yes, I know. Jane, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It sounds wonderful. It sounds like we can make a difference. I just want a bit of clarity from the project about the project. Is it $15,000 over 2 years that we hope to raise, or $15,000 per year?
Per year, 15.
Per, okay.
We raised 15. Well, our goal last year was 15,000, and we made we took in over 16,000. Since then, the project has become better known. Our goal is still 15,000, but our hope is that we'll go a bit beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Lynn?
Yeah, just again, just to speak to the Young, Happy, Healthy project. I was really impressed with, I think it was the first school, the Mungwo school, where the girls put on, it's an elementary school, and the girls put on a skit that was really very mature, talking about sexual and reproductive health issues and kind of just say no and all that, you know. They were obviously really well taught in what's important, and it was. I wish we could have filmed the whole thing, you know. Yeah.
I did get a bit of it on video, which is I've shared with Linda and Grace, and hopefully is passed on. But no, I didn't get a chance to record everything. But yeah, it was. I think it's something that also struck me, and I think we spoke about in some of our many hours on the road in those couple of days, was how much more extroverted and sort of brave the girls were in that first school in particular, when it came to kind of standing and speaking at the front of the room, and the boys tend to be a lot more shy. And I remember thinking, oh, this is great that we're that we're really seeing the girl child kind of take the lead at this school. And that's obviously a part of the work, although Zicalo is quick to mention that they obviously work with the boys, because you can't exclude anybody in it. You know, it takes educating both boys and girls. But yeah, I think we were all impressed with that it was the girls that were putting up their hand to volunteer at that first school that we visited. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the other thing that becomes really, that you're really impressed by, is how little it takes to make a big difference. You know, and it's just, I think, an encouragement to raise as much as we can, because it goes a long way. I think somebody was asking about, I can't remember where it was, because we went to some other schools as well, but you know, how much to build a dining room, and they said it would be $30,000. Well, that's what we're aiming for, you know, and it could create a whole building. So it's you know, yeah, your money goes a long way.
Okay, I'm going to say a word about raising money. Clubs do it different ways. In my club, St. John's, we give some of the money that we raise from our book sale. But individual members are encouraged to donate as well. Now, I know that our president, Linda Sestock, put off a tremendously successful event last year. And Linda, would you mind, I'm sure you'd be delighted to say a few words about that project.
You know, I like to talk, Grace. Yes, so last year I did a networking breakfast, and it was for 60 million girls last year. So I charged $60 per person, and then I did a breakfast, subtracted the breakfast, which was $30. Everybody was able to get a $30 gift tax credit. And then I reached out to sponsors. And so I had a lot of people, I did sponsorship, and I didn't ask a great deal of money, and I included tickets in it. I'm trying to remember how much money I raised, but it wasn't a lot of work, and it worked out really well. So if anyone ever wants to talk about it and have more details, I'm happy to help with that.
Another project is I did this one. Thursday's store in Toronto gave me a big suitcase full of shoes, which I sold to CFUW members and sent the money off to 60 million girls. So there's all kinds of things that people can do. And you're very creative. Lynn, did you want to say something else?
No, sorry. Am I still? No.
Okay, all right. Is there anyone else who wishes to say something? I'd like to thank Jamie for setting up this tonight. And I'd like to thank Shannon Numberoo from Stephen Lewis Foundation. And we really appreciate being able to work with you. And we certainly hope that this is a successful venture. And it's going over 2 years, so it had better be successful. Okay, does anyone else wish to say something before we close? No? All right, well, follow us in Club Action News, and Larissa from our subcommittee, will be writing updates from time to time to keep you all up to date on what's happening. So, thank you.